XNG has a pattern of abuse of their drivers. I just want to take a little detour here. And they have had quite a few, actually 5 of these rollover tip-over events since they started about a year and a half ago, a little more than a year and a half ago now. This was the driver of the first rollover, happened just a couple of weeks after the facility first opened. And 29-year-old female driver, she had a life-threatening head injury. She had a traumatic head injury. You can see this here. And but she didn't receive critical care for 3 hours. Now, the reason I'm even bringing this up is because we see a pattern. We see a pattern with XNG, with how these drivers are treated. And very commonly, these drivers are, they're injured. Every time these drivers have been injured, sometimes very severely, and sometimes they haven't received critical care for hours after the event. And I don't think there's any excuse for that. This young woman could have died. This young woman could have died, seriously, from that head injury. She got struck with an object inside the cab. And when she went to the Cabot Hospital, Cabot is on the name of the hospital, they sent her home with dirt in her wound. And then the other thing is, this is the Cabot Hospital. Let me show you this. Endless Mountains Hospital. Cabot Medical Center. You can see Cabot right here. Do I have a close-up? Oh, there we go. This is a George Stark tweet. He's proud of the Cabot Medical Office Building. And the reason why we're making the connection between Cabot and the hospital is that, with regards to this bomb truck incident, is that you have to keep in mind that the hospital is funded by the driller whose gas was in the truck. This is Pennsylvania State Senator Gene Yaw presenting an award to George Stark. George Stark is the Public Relations Director of Cabot Oil and Gas in Susquehanna County. And Gene Yaw is presenting Cabot with an award because they won an award. Yep, that's right, because Governor Corbett gave them the State Impact Award. Boy, that's a little bit of inadvertent truth sneaking out, right? Yeah, they've sure had an impact, all right. So because the governor, Tom Corbett, the Republican pro-frack governor that we used to have prior to the Democratic pro-frack governor, Tom Wolf, Tom Corbett gave Cabot an award, and in recognition of that, Gene Yaw gave Cabot another award. So this just in from the Jesus, will you two just get a room department? What a disgusting display of public affection. Or maybe public corruption, I don't know. Isn't it funny how they planted trees in the summertime? These trees produce leaves, so it covers up. I think some of the people there want to try to hide that, cover it up. The people at the hospital, I heard they did that intentionally. They planted trees in the front of the sign because they know that it's potentially a conflict of interest. Okay, so this is the second, and let's go back to the to this one. This young woman, 29-year-old female driver. This is the other pattern. Okay, so the first thing when she actually got to the hospital, very first thing they did was, what do you think it was? Was it take her vital signs, like, examine her for, ask her intake questions? Are you allergic to any medications? Anything like that? No, it was a drug test. They made her take an involuntary drug test, basically. And that's not for her benefit. That's basically to try to say, to give the company and the company's insurance company an out, to blame it on the driver so that then they don't have to examine any other possible extenuating circumstances. For instance, some mechanical problem with these trucks, hint, hint, and or an operational issue with the company, with how this company is doing business. And I think both of those are indicated when we look at the grand total of all of these rollover accidents that have happened. Okay, there's the Cabot Hospital. This is the driver of the second rollover crash. And what we saw, same thing. His truck was a tip over. This is the spot where the driver landed. And you can see that these are drainage pipes that were buried along the side of the road. And there was such force due to this fully loaded truck, which is we believe him to be far exceeding 80,000 pounds. The weight of this truck was so tremendous that when he drove into this ditch, it actually pulled or pushed the, he dug down into the dirt there and pulled these giant pipes out of the ground, forced these pipes out of the ground. Okay, so just to give you some perspective here on the location of the first two rollover crashes which occurred. This is the XNG terminal in Forest Lake, PA. First of all, let's just give you some perspective where we are. So this is Pennsylvania down here. This is New York up here. Here's Binghamton, Ithaca, New York City, Long Island. Albany is up here. Okay, so let's zoom in to Forest Lake, Susquehanna County right here. This is the XNG truck terminal right here. And this is an updated map, so we see the wall is around the compressor. So one thing that's interesting to look at is that, do we see any what would look like coolers? I don't see any coolers. So let's look at what a cooler would look like. This is a photograph that I actually took. So this is the Windsor compressor. This is actually on the Laser Northeast. This is where the Laser Northeast gathering line connects to the Millennium Pipeline. Now they've changed the name of it since then. It's now called something called the Williams New York Main Line or something like that, but it's the same pipeline. So what we see here is this is the Windsor compressor. They call it that because it's in Windsor, New York. It's also called the Dunbar compressor. That's the name of the road where the entrance was supposed to be. So we see several things here. First of all, we see, what are these? These are dehydrators and gas processing equipment here to remove fluids like water, and there's probably other kinds of, there could be hydrogen sulfide removal. There could be other removal of other unwanted things in these towers here. They're called glycol dehydrators. And then here's the exhaust stack. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 engines. When I flew over, they've made modifications since then. Now you see these here, right here. What are these? These are gas coolers. These are like giant radiators that cool the gas before it enters the pipeline, because when you compress the gas, it heats it. This is from thermodynamics. It's from the ideal gas law. You can look that up. So what I want you to look at is, first of all, when you look at this facility, do you see anything that looks like coolers? There's 2 compressors. There's one compressor here and there's another compressor here. So that is basically, this is where they add, there's some tanks here where they add the mercaptan. You can't see them too clearly in this photograph. And this is where they pull it off the gathering line. This is the tap to the gathering line. It's all Cabot's gas. Do we see any coolers here? This is going to be important in a future video coming up here. But basically I wanted to show you that this is Forest Lake, PA, Susquehanna County. Here's the actual lake. And then here is where the first crash, rollover, this was a true rollover crash, happened just a few weeks after the facility opened. And then here is the second one. This one is about a mile out, and this is about 1.5 miles out. So they're both within 2 miles of the terminal here in Forest Lake. This is the driver of the second rollover crash. So he had to jump out of the cab and landed on the ground. He hurt his foot or ankle, possibly fractured a bone. So he had a foot injury, and I believe he also had a shoulder injury. These shoulder injuries are very common in these particular accidents because of the way the seatbelts connect and the G-force is involved. And when he jumped out of his cab, he said he landed like a sack of potatoes, and he hit his shoulder on the ground when he jumped out of the cab. So he definitely had injuries, but this guy was the worst so far in terms of how they treated him. He didn't get critical care for 10 hours. 10 hours after his wreck. 10 hours, and they didn't even call him an ambulance. He had to. He was transported in a private vehicle. Hey friends, please subscribe to the Bill Houston Podcast channel on YouTube, like and share the video, and if you can, tinyurl.com/donate to Bill Houston. Thanks.